Welcome to the North Sessions. Settle in and let every story carry you towards sleep. My name is Lewis, and tonight I will be your guide. This evening we travel to the quiet halls of Asgard, where the firelight is already dimming and two dark wings are folding themselves, one by one, against the shoulders of a listening god. The fire you can hear now is warm and steady, and beneath it moves something softer, a piano finding its way through old. Gentle tones, woven with frequencies that ask nothing of you except that you let go. Take a breath and let the sound settle around you like a heavy blanket. Notice first the weight of your body where it rests. Feel how the surface beneath you holds you without effort, firm and unmoving, asking nothing in return. Your shoulders can release a little now. There is no reason to hold them up any longer tonight. Let your jaw go soft. Let the space behind your eyes grow easy and still. Your hands are resting somewhere, and they are doing nothing at all, and that is exactly right. Feel your breath moving in and moving out at its own quiet pace. Your chest rises, your chest falls, each breath a little more steady than the one before. Your legs are heavy now, in a comfortable, welcome way. The kind of heaviness that comes only when the day is truly done. You are safe, you are warm, and the story is already waiting for you just ahead, in the long golden light of a fire that has been burning since before the world learned its own name. The fire had settled into itself by then, burning low and even, throwing a wash of amber across the stone floor of the hall. Huginn sat where he had landed, on the great carved post at the end of Odin's long bench, his claws finding their familiar grip in the worn groove of the wood. He began to preen. It was a careful thing, the way he worked through his wing feathers one by one, drawing each long quill between the edges of his beak with a patience that belonged entirely to the evening. The firelight caught the blue-black sheen of his plumage as he moved, that deep, iridescent color that was never quite black and never quite anything else, shifting between raven dark and something almost like the inside of a winter sky just before the stars appeared. The smell of the hall was warm around him. Old wood and pine resin, and the faint mineral cold of stone that had been slowly breathing in the fire's heat for hours. It was the smell of ending, of a day folding quietly into itself, and Huginn knew it the way he knew the wind over the high ridges of the world tree's branches. Each feather he drew through his beak made almost no sound at all. A soft, steady whisper, like a single finger drawn along the edge of a woven cloth. He worked from the shoulder outward, following the natural grain of the wing, setting each quill back into its right place with the ease of long habit. One feather had bent slightly at its tip during the long flight back from the lower world. He found it without searching, the way you always find the one small thing that is not quite right, and he worked at it gently until it lay flat again among its neighbors. Across the hall, Muninn had tucked her head beneath one wing and gone still. Her breathing was long and easy, barely visible in the rise and fall of her breast feathers. She was already somewhere between waking and the deep rest that followed a day of carrying so much of the world's memory inside one small body. Huginn glanced at her once. There was nothing in that look that needed a name. It was simply the acknowledgement that she was there, and that she was resting, and that this was as it should be. He returned to his preening. The fire shifted, settling another degree lower, and the light in the hall grew a little softer around the edges, the shadows along the far wall deepening to the color of deep water. He drew one more feather through his beak, then another. The motion was its own kind of rest, even for a creature still awake. Steady, quiet, belonging entirely to the hour. Odin had not moved for some time. He sat at the far end of the long bench, one broad forearm resting on the table, his good eye half closed toward the fire. He had the quality of very old stone on an evening like this, still in a way that was not absence, but rather a deep and settled presence. The kind that fills a room the way warmth fills it, without announcing itself. Huginn noticed him the way he noticed most things, not with alarm, not with urgency. Simply with the steady, gathering awareness that was the nature of thought itself. The fire had dropped another degree. The pine resin smell was stronger now, rising as the log nearest the grate gave up a little more of itself to the heat. Somewhere in the depths of the hall, a timber shifted with a low, unhurried sound, the hall breathing in its own way as the night outside pressed cold against the stone. Odin's hand rose. It was a slow movement, without purpose that needed naming, the way a sleeper's hand sometimes moves to pull a blanket closer, without the mind being involved at all. It crossed the short distance between them and came to rest on Huginn's back, broad and warm, the roughened fingers settling between the wings with a familiar ease. Huginn went still beneath it, not with tension, not with any particular feeling that had a clean edge to it. He simply stopped mid-motion, one wing held slightly out from his body where he had been working at a secondary covert feather, and let the weight of the hand be what it was. It was warm, remarkably warm, the way hearthstones are warm, holding heat they gathered hours ago and giving it back slowly and without condition. The hand did not press. It did not stroke or shift or demand anything of him. It simply rested. And in resting it said, without words, something that did not need words, that the evening was quiet, that the flight was done, that here in the hall, with the fire low and Muninn breathing easy across the way, Everything had arrived at exactly the place it was meant to arrive. Huginn lowered his wing very gently back to his side. He turned his head once toward the fire, watching the slow collapse of a small ember into the grate below. It broke apart without a sound, its red core going soft and orange, and then at the edges, the grey of old ash, like a thought releasing itself when you stop holding it. He did not preen again just yet. He stood beneath the quiet weight of that hand, and the hall held them both, and the fire kept its own counsel. And outside, the cold night went on being the cold night, entirely at its own pace. Across the hall, Muninn was settling. It happened in stages, the way sleep always announces itself honestly to those who are not fighting it. First, her talons shifted on the perch, finding a grip that was less about holding and more about belonging there, weight distributed evenly across the wood. Then her feathers rose once, all at once, lifting and then lowering in a slow breath of dark plumage, rearranging the night-colored layers into something softer and more interior. The fire gave a low, easy sound, a single tick of cooling iron from somewhere near the base of the grate, and the smell of wood smoke had deepened into something almost sweet. Muninn's head moved. It tilted to the right first, the small dark eye catching one last moment of firelight, amber and distant, the way a candle seen through old glass holds its flame. Then her beak found the edge of her wing, the long primary feathers at the shoulder, and she pressed it gently inward, tucking herself into the warmth she had carried back from the long sky without knowing she was carrying it. She was not gone yet. Memory does not vanish quickly. It folds. Even now, with her eye closing and her weight shifting rearward onto her heels, there were impressions still drifting through her. The particular blue of a snowfield seen from very high up, the muffled sound of a village at supper, the smell of bread from an open window passed over at speed. None of these demanded anything of her. They were simply there, the way the contents of a deep drawer are there, present and quiet, and requiring nothing. Her breathing steadied. It came in barely visible pulses now, the faintest expansion and release along her sides, the feathers lifting in a rhythm that matched nothing so much as the fire itself. In and out, the log and the bird keeping the same quiet time. Huginn watched this from where he stood beneath Odin's still hand. He did not watch with anything that needed naming. He simply noted, the way thought notes everything, that his counterpart had arrived at the far edge of wakefulness and was stepping very gently over it. There was no sound from Muninn now. Only the soft architecture of a sleeping bird, beak tucked and feathers loose, and the long, cold journey of the day already being absorbed back into warmth and stillness. The hall kept its quiet. The fire kept its fire. And memory, finally, let itself rest. The fire had found a lower, steadier note by then, the bright crackle of fresh wood giving way to the softer conversation of embers doing their long work. Huginn stood in the warmth of it, still beneath Odin's hand, and became aware of something at the edge of his left wing. A single feather had lifted out of its row, not by much. The cold of the upper air had done this sometimes, the way wind finds the smallest gap in anything and widens it by degrees, working between layers until something no longer lies quite flat. He could feel it now that he was still, a faint unevenness in the dark arrangement of himself. One note in the wrong position, the way a word sits oddly in a sentence that was otherwise smooth. He turned his head toward it, easy and without urgency. The feather was a secondary, long and dark, catching the firelight along its spine in a narrow line of amber. He took the outer edge of it gently in his beak, holding it the way you might hold something you want to understand, not to change, just to feel the shape of it and know where it had come from. Then he drew his beak along the full length of the shaft, slowly, from base to tip. The barbs, which had separated in the cold air of the high crossing, came together again with a sound too small for the room to hold, a whisper of something closing. He did this twice more, steady and patient, going no faster than the task asked of him. The wood smoke moved above the fire in its quiet column, bending once at some warmth he could not see, then continuing. When he lifted his head again, the feather lay flat with the others, returned to the whole, indistinguishable now from every other dark layer. The slight unevenness was gone. He settled back into his stillness with the ease of something that had never been troubled. Across the hall, the fire gave a long breath of settling ash, orange light flowering briefly in the grate and then drawing back. Odin had not moved. His hand rested where it always rested, and the weight of it was familiar, a thing that asked nothing and offered a great deal. Huginn allowed his gaze to travel the room once, the long shadows at the far wall, the dark beams overhead, the quiet shape of Muninn already folded into herself on her perch near the fire. Everything was where it belonged. He did not close his eyes yet. Thought rarely hurries toward rest. But he had done what needed doing, and the wing was whole, and the fire was warm. And the hall was gentle around him in the way that only night, gone deep and sure, can be gentle. Across the hall, Muninn stirred. It was not much of a movement. A small rearrangement, the kind a sleeping thing makes when the body asks for something slightly different without quite waking. Her weight shifted on the perch, one talon releasing and requiring the wood, and the dark mass of her turned a degree or two toward the fire. The firelight found the edge of her wing as she moved, tracing it in a thin line of amber the way the last of a sunset traces a hill it is leaving. She settled again, but not quite all the way. Something was still adjusting. Odin had not looked up. His hand lay across Huginn's back, unhurried and still, and the sound of his breathing was steady in the room, even and long, like the pull of a tide that has been doing this for a very long time. Muninn's head moved. She drew it down and around, tucking her beak into the soft dark between her wing and her body, and then she was still. Just the rise and fall of her breathing remained, visible in the way the feathers at her chest lifted once, and then fell, and then lifted once again. The fire cracked softly. A piece of wood had settled inward on itself, giving off a brief scattering of orange before the glow drew back to its quiet, even warmth. The hall absorbed the sound without returning it. Everything in the room seemed to lean gently toward the same direction, the way a field of grain, caught in a wind too light to name, bends all at once and holds. Huginn watched his companion for a moment. Memory was folded now inside herself, head down, breath easy. There was something good in that. The world they had crossed together in the long hours of the air, all its cold and all its wide distances, had folded down too into something smaller, into this room, into this warmth, into the small dark hollow, beneath a wing where a great deal of remembering could rest. Huginn did not think this in words. Thought rarely arrives in words at this hour. He simply noted that Muninn was still, and that the stillness seemed complete. Somewhere beyond the hall, the night was doing what it does, holding everything, all of it, the far fields and the quiet villages and the rivers running dark beneath their ice, all of it resting under the same patient dark. But in here the fire was warm, and Muninn breathed, and the hall was easy around them both, the way a room becomes easy when nothing more is needed from it, and nothing more is asked. The hand moved first, not by decision exactly, more the way a sleeping river changes course over years, finding the easier way without choosing it. Odin's hand lifted from Huginn's back and drifted, crossing the small warm distance between the two birds. It came to rest at the edge of Muninn's wing. The feathers there were dense and soft, each one slightly overlapping the next, laid in a direction the hand could follow without thinking. He drew his fingers along them, from the curve of the shoulder down toward the folded tip. A careful motion and quiet. Muninn did not wake. Her breathing continued, steady and complete. The feathers at her chest rose once, and then they settled, and she did not stir at all beneath the hand. The fire shifted behind them. A slow movement of light moved through the room, brightening the near wall and then softening again, the way clouds pass over open ground without any urgency. Odin's hand moved again, the same direction, following the lay of the feathers, easy and without any particular purpose. The way water moves along a familiar channel, not because anything is pulling it, but because the shape of the ground is known. Munin's feathers were cool near the surface and warmer deeper. Between them the air was still and held. The hand found that warmth and stayed near it. Memory was still sleeping. Huginn could feel the small vibration of the gesture transmitted through the perch and the room, the way a calm pond carries the trace of something set into it long after the motion has ended. He was aware of it the way he was aware of the fire and the dark outside. As part of the whole, Odin's breathing did not change. The stroke continued, even and without hurry, as though the hand and the bird and the warmth had all agreed to this long before the evening came. The feathers gave a little under each pass, and then returned, finding their arrangement again without any trouble. The fire gave a small sound, not a crack exactly, softer than that. The sound a burning thing makes when it is no longer actively burning so much as simply glowing, held together by its own steady warmth. The hall was the same temperature it had been. The same dark at the edges, the same amber at the center. Muninn breathing, Huginn watching or resting, or something between the two. Odin's hand still moving, tracing the wing, following the feathers the way a person follows the words of something read so many times the reading and the remembering have become one thing. It continued like that for a while. There was no reason for it to stop. The air in the hall had shifted, not by much. The kind of cooling that happens when a fire settles into its later hours, when the burning logs have given their best heat and now simply hold what remains. The warmth was still present. It had only moved a little further from the edges of the room. Odin noticed it first at his shoulders, a faint drawing in of the air there, cool against the fabric of his cloak where it had slipped back. The fabric was heavy and dark, and had been with him long enough that it moved the way familiar things move. Without needing to be managed, he reached with his free hand and gathered it forward, a quiet adjustment, the kind made without looking, the fingers finding the hem and pulling it back across his shoulder, settling it into place again. The wool was dense and slightly rough at the edge where it folded. Against the back of his hand, it felt like stone that has been sitting in shade, cool on the surface, holding its texture the way old things do. Huginn made no movement. Muninn breathed on. The cloak settled across Odin's shoulders and stayed. The collar of it came forward, touching the line of his jaw on one side, and he let it rest there. The wool held the warmth that had been between him and the fabric all evening. It returned that warmth now, steady and contained. The fire gave a small shift of light. Odin's hand had not stopped moving. It continued along Muninn's wing, following the same familiar direction, even as the other hand released the cloak and returned to stillness at his knee. The two things had happened at the same time, almost without interruption. The adjustment and the continuation, each one taking only what it needed. The cooling air was still present at the far end of the hall. It moved along the floor in the way cool air does, taking the lower places first, finding the spaces between things. But where Odin sat, the warmth of the fire still gathered, and the cloak held it close. He sat the way he had been sitting. The same posture, the same slight forward lean, the same weight settled into the chair, as though it had been decided long ago and not revisited. The cloak lay across him like something trusted, like the way a known road feels under the feet even in the dark. The birds were quiet. The fire was quiet. The hall held its temperature and did not change further. The fire had grown very quiet. Odin's hand moved from Munin's wing and came to rest at the side of the chair. It found the armrest the way it always did, without deliberate seeking. The hand simply arrived where it had arrived many times before. He let it rest there for a moment. Then his thumb began to move. It was a small movement, the kind that happens almost without deciding. His thumb traced along the edge of the armrest, following a place where the wood had worn smooth, where years of the same contact had taken the grain down to something finer, something that no longer caught the skin at all. The surface there was different from the rest. The wood beside it still had its texture, still held the fine ridges of the grain, slight but present. But this one place, this small worn patch beneath his thumb, had given that up entirely. It was even, continuous, the way river stones are, carried long enough by water that every small resistance has been taken from them. Odin's thumb moved across it once, then again. There was no particular reason. It was simply there, and his hand had found it, and the movement was easy. Huginn was still. Muninn was still. The fire gave a very faint sound, low and brief, and then the hall returned to what it had been. Warm near the center, quiet along the edges, the kind of quiet that does not ask anything. His thumb continued. The worn place was small, perhaps the width of 2 fingers, no more. But within that space, the wood was very smooth, and the sensation of it was steady and even. Reliable in the way that familiar things are reliable, not surprising, not asking to be noticed, simply present. He had sat in this chair through many evenings. His hand knew the armrest the way his feet knew the floor between the chair and the fire, without needing to think, without needing to look. The wool of his cloak lay across his shoulders and did not move. The birds rested. The warmth held. His thumb moved once more across the worn place in the wood and then grew still. The hand remained where it was, resting at the side of the chair, settled into a posture it had practiced for years. The fire breathed on. The hall held its warmth. Odin sat, and the quiet continued around him, and nothing asked to be different than it was. The fire breathed. Huginn shifted. It was a small thing. The raven moved his weight from one foot to the other, the way a bird does when standing still for a long time. Not restless, not troubled, simply adjusting. The way a tree shifts in a wind so light it can hardly be felt. His talons found their grip again on Odin's shoulder. The wool of the cloak gathered slightly where he settled. Then it was still. Muninn did not stir. The fire did not change. The hall held what it had been holding for a long time now. Warmth near the center, quiet at the edges. The familiar smell of wood smoke, low and even, moving nowhere in particular. Huginn's feathers lay flat again. His weight was settled. Odin felt the small shift, the way you feel something familiar without naming it. The pressure adjusted, redistributed, and then it was simply there again. Steady. The raven on his shoulder and the other raven resting across the hall and the chair beneath him and the fire ahead of him. He did not open his eye. His hand rested at the side of the chair. His thumb was still now against the smooth place in the wood. The hall breathed in the way that quiet halls do. Not quite sound, not quite silence. Something between them that has no sharper name. Huginn stood without hurry. His feet held the shoulder the way they had held it through the long flight back. Easy now that the flying was done, resting into something solid after a long time in the air. The fire gave a very soft sound, low and brief as it had before. Then the quiet returned. Odin sat. The ravens rested. The warmth continued around all three of them, unasked for, present in the way that warmth in an old hall is always present. Familiar, untroubled. Huginn did not move again. The hall did not ask him to. The fire held its light against the old stones. The hall held its warmth against the dark beyond the walls. And out there, across the wide and sleeping world, the fields and forests and frozen rivers lay the way they had always lain at this hour, resting beneath whatever sky covered them, present and unhurried and still. The smoke rose and thinned and disappeared into the dark above the rafters. The ravens rested on their god's shoulders, each one carrying what it knew into a quiet deeper than words. And the hall, which had stood through many evenings, simply continued to stand. The fire breathed, the warmth held. Nothing asked to be different than it was.